Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jordan Morgan. I'm the Director of Programs at the London-based conflict resolution NGO Forward Thinking. I wanted to first just say thank you to the Republic of Turkey and the Directorate of Communications for facilitating such a wonderful conference and bringing such a distinguished panel together. Today's topic is New Fronts to Hybrid Threats. We've got just over an hour to cover what is a very complex topic. But I first just wanted to root the discussion in, whilst we sit here in this wonderful conference room, root the discussion in the ongoing conflicts in Gaza and in the Ukraine. I think whilst many of us will have never been to those places, we're very much experiencing those conflicts through our televisions, through the news, through our mobile phones, through social media, and we're hearing about them through the radio. And I think very much now more than ever, disinformation campaigns as part of those conflicts are very potent. And the main aim of disinformation, which is the deliberate sharing of wrong information, is it challenges and destroys our very understanding of what is true and what is truth. And that's dangerous in our societies, it's dangerous for our democracies, it's dangerous for our political leadership, and can create real instability within our societies. But disinformation is nothing new. As long as there's been conflict, there's been deception. And in World War II, Operation Fortitude was one such deception campaign where the Allied forces deceived the German High Command about the space in which the Normandy D-Day landings would take place. But I think in today's conflicts, disinformation has made deception more potent, much more potent than it ever was. And I think one of the reasons for that is the proliferation of technology that we all have. I wanted to just put a bit more context on today's discussion. And I think three challenges that we face, and then I'll hand over to the panel. The first, I think, is the massive rate of change. Since the 19th century, all over the world, societies are facing huge levels of change. Social change, economic change, technological change, and political change, and indeed environmental change. And that's putting our societies under huge pressure. And so when it comes to disinformation, it can create small changes, and that can create tipping points in our societies that make societies much more dysfunctional than they previously were. The other point is population growth. In November 2022, the global population reached 8 billion people. Now, the UN predicts in the next 30 years that population growth will increase by another 2 billion people. That will be 10 billion people on the planet in total. Now, that's going to create even more pressures on our institutions, on our societies, and create many challenges down the road. And I think the third point is about influence. As there are more and more people on the planet, I think a lot of people feel it's more difficult to influence the policies and things around them. Policy is made for people and not with people. And I think it's in this complex mix that we get hybrid threats and hybrid warfare emerging that's getting more potent. Now, before I hand over to the panel, I just wanted to put a few ground rules down. I want the session to be interactive. I've asked for a roving mic, so I'm not sure where that is. But after each presentation, I'd like to take one question from the floor to each of our panel, and then we'll conclude in just over an hour's time. Now, I'd like to introduce the panel. Here with me today we have Associate Professor David Campbell from the University of Vienna. We have Professor Toshio Hoshino from Osaka University. We have Rodan Hoxha, the Executive Director of the Albanian Center for Quality Journalism, and Karim El-Gendi from Chatham House, a Senior Fellow from Chatham House. It's a pleasure to have you here. So I'd like to now hand over to Professor Campbell.
Jordan, many thanks for passing on the word. First of all and foremost, I want to express my thankfulness to have been invited to this conference. It's a great place. Teşekkür ederim. Hopefully I pronounced this correctly. Okay. Now I've got the pointer. Yes. Now this is, so to say, just the sketch of the few points I will talk now. We were instructed not to talk more than 5 to 8 minutes. So the slides will be basically plain text, no figures, and no data. It's just some basic and few thoughts. Now, I thought not to focus in my short presentation on problems or the depiction of problems. I think we talked a lot about the problems. It should be more the shift referring to possible remedies, solutions, problem solving, or highlighting somehow what may be, in a certain sense, the path forward. So what are the options available for humanity on this planet? Now, to begin with a quote, yes, there's this famous French thinker, philosopher, intellect, Victor Hugo, living in the 19th century, yes? And this one famous quote which is being referred to him is the sentence, "No army can stop an idea whose time has come," yes? And this means basically it's not force, it's not brutality, but it's the strength in that sense of our ideas as human beings that are actually crafting the world, yes? And so in that sense, the one basic implication is to throw up the question, well, has the time in that sense for democracy come and arrived? And I believe that democracy is the path we should follow, and so to say, democracy would be the solution. But of course, there are also different quotes. There's like my dear friend Elias Karianis, who is also an intellectual scholar, who coined the phrase, democracy and the environment as endangered species, yes? And this means we cannot take democracy as something granted. Democracy is evolving, it's developing, but of course it's also being challenged and questioned, yes? And so in a certain sense, the narrative that we're having on Earth today, yes, could we say, is there something like a global race, a global competition between democracies, semi-democracies on the one hand, or autocracies or semi-autocracies on the other? So who is finally going to win this race and this gamble? Yes, if you just look at the war spreading, I think it's very shocking, the level of conflict on Earth. So this, in that sense, is really something very important. And who is going, which of these role models is going to prevail? Will it be democracy or autocracy? And specifically, of course, here's also the question, if we want to develop, yes, and this, I think, should always be our desire, to have something like a sustainable development of society, of the economy, etc. Is democracy for that necessary, yes? So this means if you take democracy out of the basket, are you doomed, so to say, to fail or not, yes? But maybe it's a little bit an undecided question, yes? It's a question of beliefs. If that's what we want to support, so what's the empirical message? I think in that context also, it's necessary to posture democracy, you know, in the context of knowledge creation, innovation, and education, yes? And if we can associate these lines of development, I think there's some helpful information. As an example, there is this famous Dutch scholar, De Welt, who published back in 2010 a book. He edited, in fact, the book with Springer Publisher, Knowledge Democracy. Yes? And this means, or implies in a certain sense, that the further development of democracy and the further development of knowledge somehow are being intertwined. Yes? And is this the case? I think this is in fact also good news for democracy. At the same time, of course, if we believe that the further advances of democracy or knowledge of democracy are going to associate with something like knowledge and knowledge democracy, we also can pose the question, can democracy act as something as an enabler of innovation? Yes? I mean, innovation, of course, is this one crucial set of factors and sources moving and pushing on economy. Yes? But the point would be here to ask, is democracy as a context, as a frame, or is there something supporting and enabling democracy? And there may be something also like an analogy, yes? And the analogy would be to say, the more knowledge is advancing, the more diverse knowledge is becoming. So we're facing different knowledge and innovation modes, creating this diverse ecosystem of different types and forms of knowledge. Yes? And I believe the equivalent could be somehow with this political pluralism in a democracy. Yes? I mean, how can you diversify knowledge with being politically autocratic? Yes? So I think you need, so to say, the forms of political freedom to really encourage your communities in that sense to engage in knowledge and the further innovation and knowledge development. There's also, in that sense, so to say, the saying of education as a form, something like democracy through education, yes? So the education of course, again, is maturing, yes? And I would, in that sense, always recommend to say that the education into which a society or a political system is willing to invest in that sense, of course, is the biggest treasure a society has. And as a final thought, we can also depict this here, yes? Maybe we, in a certain sense, overestimate economic successes of autocracies, yes? Because I believe autocracies are benefiting, yes, of these knowledge, inventions, and discoveries of the freer societies on Earth. Perhaps in a certain sense, stealing the ideas being created in something like a democratic ecosystems, yes? Which actually means anyway that autocracy would have a very difficult position on Earth without the democracies. So in that sense, this is a picture taken yesterday from the motto or the theme, so to say, of that conference. And again, hopefully, rightfully pronounced Teşekkür ederim for your audience. And I look forward, of course, to the discussion following. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Campbell. Now, there should be a microphone somewhere, so I'd like to take a question from the audience for Professor Campbell on his presentation. Do we have any questions? Everyone's still waking up. Okay, well, I have a question for you, yes, Professor Campbell. You talked about democracy versus autocracy, and autocracies are leapfrogging democracies in some way. But when it comes to hybrid threats and disinformation, what would you say is more resilient? What system of governments is more resilient to disinformation? Would you say it's democracies or autocracies?
This, of course, is one of the basic questions, and there's probably always a difference what you want to have the case and what's empirically the reality is. I think sometimes, democracies are being criticized for being perhaps, a little bit chaotic, these different opinions floating around, yes. But you must see it in that way. If a society somehow is on the front line of development, yes, and on the front line of development, the future is always uncertain. It's like a fog, yes. And to meet and to match this uncertainty, you need a diversity, yes? So you need, I think, this chaos of different opinions and these dialogues and this interaction to match the uncertainty of the future, yes? Those areas where autocracies can perform well is in a situation where the catch-up is, because then, autocratic regimes look on all the examples and solutions on Earth and they try to blend together their own story. But once a society itself is arriving at that front line, you, in that sense, must develop your own resources to proceed. So in that sense, hopefully, autocracies can never bypass, of course, democracies. But still, of course, we always must be cautious, and we're being challenged, intellectually and beyond, to think further and not to take democracy as something given, hammered into solid rock. I mean, democracies, as history always has shown us and taught us, of course, also can be destroyed from within or from abroad.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now hand over to Professor Toshio Hoshino for his presentation. Professor.
Thank you, Jordan, for your warm, kind introduction. Thank you for inviting me in this excellent panel. When we talk about the new fronts to hybrid threats, the things came up to my mind is we need a new policy for collective security for humanity and the planet. It sounds very broad and big in the face of so many conflicts and violence in front of us, but at the same time, we have to look to the future. There is a strategic message we've been hearing: stop the war or stop violence, but those are not heard. And of course, these are the important questions we need to solve. But at the same time, those are not the only issue we are faced today. As we see it, the world today is faced with hybrid threats to the humanity as a whole in a global scale. This is threats which are existential, which is directly affects our own existence as a human beings on this planet, and they are Anthropocene in nature and intergenerational. So that the future history, if we have a history for the future, depends on what the kind of decisions we make today. And those are the things we should be in our mind while we try to tackle and address all the challenges we have in our contemporary generation. Well, today we have so many problems. The nexus of climate crisis, disruptive technologies, and nuclear threats, those are now combined. So that Bruton of the atomic scientists recently called this is existential nexus. It is very apt to say in that way. And also we need to think about the hybrid threat is have a the implication to the humanity as a whole and also to the planet. I'm very pleased that Jordan introduced this session with a characterization of the so many changes we have made over the years, and also the population changes and so forth. Yes, that is exactly the things we are witnessing, although we are aware of it daily or not. Well, you have heard the term Anthropocene, which is the geological term for the period. It means that the human beings had an impact on the geological era. And this Economist journal, which is used the term already in 2011. So but I think it's getting very, very real because the Nature, that is a scientific journal. There is an article saying that the human-made mass is now overpassing that biomass. See, what means that what we have in the planet, the natural one, is already surpassed by the human-made concrete bricks or steel or chemicals and so forth. this is exactly the things we have to be in mind. So the population growth, yes, and also the social changes, yes, and a lot of human activities have made this sort of great accelerations, which naturally have an impact on the planet. Yes, so while we are living in our life, that there is a lot of changes to the positive way, but at the same time, a lot of stress going to the planet. I was involved in a project organized by UNDP last year, 2022, saying new threats to human security in the Anthropocene. This is about all the combination of new threats. We have experienced COVID, and the new health challenges are still there, and violent conflict, inequality, climate change. They are all combined as hybrid threats. So this is a time for us to address those issues, not by conflicting among ourselves, but we need to collaborate together. It is a very simple but important message, and that is we are at a major watershed moment or the crossroads in the human history. So what we decide from now, year 2023 to 2030, for instance, what is a date, a year when the United Nations adopted the Sustainable Development Goals. We have all the goals to achieve, but we have so many issues conflicting among ourselves that prevent us to make the right choices at the right timing. So if we fail to make necessary choices at this point, what we are waiting for is the world which is so unsustainable. People will be very difficult to live in a world temperature is 40 degrees and so forth. But we do have an opportunity to move towards the better future, which is more sustainable, and also the no nuclear threats. I'm saying this from the country who experienced the nuclear crisis, for the Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and also for the Fukushima one. So this is very real. And there are so many other challenges. So that what we need to make a decision today counts. So the United Nations, when it was established in 1945, the main idea was to go against collective security, against the aggression towards national sovereignty. And it is still an important subject because there are so many violence going on between countries and among states and so forth. But at the same time, this is a time to think about a new type of collective security, which is to join our forces together for the interest of the humanity as a whole, or for the planet as a whole. So in my concluding remarks is very simple, because we are the one who made all those problems by ourselves, climate change and advanced technologies and others. So we have a responsibility of our generation for future generations to create the foundation for the more sustainable, inclusive, and just future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Before I open to a question from the floor, I just have one really big question that's emerging from the current conflict in Gaza. I've worked in Gaza for the last 8 years, and I'm deeply concerned by some of the scenes that we're witnessing there, not least the massive loss, unnecessary loss of human life. But one of the key challenges that we're seeing is arguably the international rules-based order established after World War II seems to be unraveling before our eyes. Now, in your excellent presentation, which I found very informative, you talked about a sustainable, inclusive, and just future. But how can we achieve that when we're witnessing such an erosion of international law, international humanitarian law in front of our very eyes?
Well, of course, this is a big question, and thank you very much for asking. I cannot find the answer immediately, but one of the frustration is I talked about the United Nations and collective security. That is what is discussed in the Security Council. See, but the Security Council is not functioning as it's supposed to be. No rule of law type of discussion was, and this was not possible because of the rivalries among the so-called P5, prominent five. Well, this is not the place to. This is the place supposed to be the place to discuss, all those questions, international peace and security, but not functioning, which is also a part of the problems to solve this, ongoing issues in a rule-based way. So in that regard, I may go on to another question, but the reform of the Security Council can be also important matter to be discussed. In that regard, I'm here in Istanbul, Turkey, a big city. The president of the Turkey, Erdogan, has a very unique and important reform agenda for the Security Council. Those are the initiatives which can be discussed more widely while try to tackle the ongoing issues in Gaza or other places. But at the same time, we need to seize this opportunity to change the institutional change of the United Nations, which was established in 1945. Over 75 years have passed, and no change is made. So these are the things that we need to do that additionally, but the Turkey's government initiative, particularly the president, was so important. We think it is very important to emphasize that. Thank you.
And do we have any questions from the floor for the hand immediately up there? Can we get a microphone, please, to the gentleman over there? If you keep your hand up. People have woken up.
Good morning, sir. At the moment, we know the people die in the Palestine, the women die in the Palestine, the children die in the Palestine. And sir, you said that the world is peace. There is no way to war. And in the presentation, you told that there is no fear of terrorism. But Professor Toshiya, why Japan is not boycotting American products? Why American doing like terrorists to the Palestine? A lot of people dying there. And also you said about Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and a lot of wars. Why Japan is not boycotting American products?
Okay.
Can you answer for these questions?
Thank you. We got the question. We probably should make the point that Professor Toshiya isn't here as a representative of the government of Japan, but I'm sure he could answer.
No, it's very difficult. Well, I do not, of course, represent government of Japan or anyone, but this is a very tragic moment. So that all I can say is that every government take this matter seriously, and then to find the right action to take. That's the only thing I can say in this role.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Well, we'll move swiftly on to Roden from the Albanian Center for Quality Journalism. Over to you, Roden, and thank you for the question.
Thank you, Jordan. It's a pleasure being here.
You just have to move your microphone a bit closer. That's it.
Is this okay? Cool.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jordan, for the kind introduction. I'd like to thank the hosts and organizers of the conference. It's an amazing thing to see so many different views and different perspectives on different issues. Well, I was hearing beforehand the distinguished Minister of Information from Lebanon, and despite our countries, not just countries, but our regions, Albania and the Middle East, not being in the same position, not being in the same situation, many of the issues with regards to disinformation and misinformation reverberate throughout, not just our regions, but throughout the world. I would like to start my presentation saying that Albania is a small country. It's about 2.8 million people. It's supposed to be 2.8 million people from the last census. It's basically one of the neighborhoods, as big as one of the neighborhoods of this great city we're here today. But being a small country, being in the Balkans, being in the, let's call it crossroads of east and west, north and south, it is a microcosm that has, let's say, experienced every single kind of misinformation and disinformation tentatives in the world. I would actually call it a petri dish of information. When it comes to the hybrid threats to information, Albania, as well as the region, has experienced many avenues of, let's call it, of dissemination of this information, in quotations. And despite the new means of dissemination of the information, the people are crucial to it. When it comes to the sources, we can have a long list of them, starting from legacy media, which is Albania, being a small country, doesn't have so many television networks, and newspapers are basically dead in Albania. They don't circulate anymore, unfortunately. Legacy media is concentrated in the hands of very few people. There are only 4 national televisions. Even the local televisions, which are more than a couple of dozens of them, are still concentrated into 3 or 4 main, let's say, businessmen. When it comes to the new age media, it's totally disorganized, unfortunately. There are more than 800 news portals, which for a country as small as Albania, it's I would call it a mess. It's totally unregulated, it's totally unsupervised, and disinformation runs rampant at a pace which is almost impossible to even not organize it, but even fact check it. As they say, a lie is halfway around the world by the time that the truth comes out. So sometimes working in the media is very, very frustrating, to say the least. And with the advent of new ways of communication, including here, I wouldn't call it new. Facebook is not new anymore, but it's being used in new ways of disseminating information through private chat groups and private and very closed off avenues of information. And with the advent of Telegram, Signal, and different messaging apps and services which allow a very closed off group to create an echo chamber with regards to information and the dissemination of disinformation and misinformation, it has been a very big challenge, not just for us, but for the region to tackle this issue. We've seen it with our colleagues in Kosovo, we've seen it with our colleagues in Serbia, in Bosnia, all over the region. And these kind of issues go even beyond the region. The new means of communication have become so impossible to tackle and so impossible to regulate that for the time being, there isn't an actual solution, a tangible solution to the issue. When it comes to the typical and atypical threats. Of course, being in the Balkans, we have 3 to 4 main issues. Of course, there's always the usual suspects. It's Russia and China. Fortunately, in Albania, both these countries don't have such a big sway. So misinformation and disinformation and as they call it, malign foreign influence is not a big issue in my country, since Albania is more European-centric when it comes to its policies and politics, but still it is there. We can see it with Chinese intervention in I would call it positive disinformation. It's not a negative disinformation towards the West or other countries, but it's disinformation in positive tones towards China's achievements. Basically, it's positive propaganda. And then when we come to the region and the conflicts in the region, which are quite a few, let's say it how it is, there is disinformation running rampant, especially with issues between Kosovo and Serbia, with issues in Bosnia, as well as inter-sectarian and inter-country issues. It's a very pervasive issue, which we have been trying to tackle, but it's almost impossible, despite our close ties and close cooperation with other media outlets in the Balkans, in all the countries that are facing these waves of disinformation. But lately we've seen another wave of new sources of threats. We've seen far-right groups which have started to pop their head out of the darkness, and we've seen them using a lot of messaging apps like Telegram and Signal as a way of disseminating the information. We've seen them cooperate with other far-right nationalist groups in Central and Eastern Europe. We've seen them communicate and work together within the Balkans, which it doesn't make any sense, because these are nationalistic groups which in essence hate each other, but they cooperate each other when it comes to the dissemination of false information and propaganda. And the worst part is that the larger population at hand, it doesn't have a filter on how to evaluate the information disseminated by these groups. There have been a lot of tackling strategies, starting from media literacy programs, which have started through training of trainer programs, through higher education programs, which so far have seen limited success, because it's a bit hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Once you hit university, it's a bit difficult to train someone how to read the news, how to examine the news. Yeah. But we have had much more success with pilot programs with the youth in primary school, not teaching them about media literacy. 2 seconds.
2 seconds, yeah.
Yeah, not teaching them about media literacy, but critical thinking, evaluation information, how they can respond to it. And then we have started with fact-checking programs, trainings on fact-checking of journalists as well as the youth. And then we have tried to integrate self-regulation and regulation. Regulation hasn't been successful because, as everybody knows, journalists are quite skeptical of government intervention.
Yeah.
And self-regulation,
Hoxha,
so
I'm going to have to stop because we're rapidly running out of time, and our timer is slightly out. So
well, basically, this is.
But thank you. I think it's good to know that even the smaller countries, we're all facing shared similar challenges, and thank you for your illuminating presentation. Now, our final speaker is Kerem, and I think we'll have to, if you can keep your presentation maybe to maximum 4 to 5 minutes, and then we'll have to close, unfortunately,
Oh, okay.
as our timer is slightly out.
Okay, so I'll be very brief. Good morning everyone. Herkese günaydın. Her şeyden önce katılım daveti için İletişim Bakanlığı'na teşekkür ediyorum. I'm honored to be here to talk to you about some of the... Thank you. I'm honored to be here to introduce you to perhaps a new subject, an emerging trend on climate misinformation. It's a bit niche, but it's something that I feel passionately about and that I focus on, and how climate misinformation derails or hinders climate action. So we're all aware of the risks of climate change, of course, and we know that the science is clear, and if we don't do anything about climate change and reduces emissions, we will clearly face dangerous climate change. I'm not going to go into the basics of the science because I'm told we only have a few minutes, but what I want to focus on here is the different ways in which climate disinformation has been taking place. So initially, the primary antagonists of climate action, those who are trying to stop climate action, are mostly the fossil fuel industry. What they have initially tried to do is to outright dismiss climate concerns as basically fake news. It doesn't happen. It's not real. The whole thing is incorrect. So they said the climate science is wrong. They said that their scientists are biased, and they said that they were going to hire communication experts and communication agencies to basically spread misinformation. But because science keeps mounting up, and we have every year thousands of papers being released that support the science, it's become very, very hard and become basically lost all credibility. This approach of denying climate change as real lost all credibility. So the approach became a little bit more sophisticated, and new tactics emerged that are more subtle and more psychological. Instead of 1D, denial, we have 4 Ds now: delay, deflection, or deflection of blame, division, and doomism. And I'll explain how these work and how they help us from transitioning or stop us from transitioning away from fossil fuels. So delay is basically, let's put off action a little bit and find a technological fix that will help us in the future, allow us to keep things as they are, but perhaps a technological fix could fix this in the future. For example, a fossil fuel industry likes to advocate this idea of capturing carbon from the atmosphere, which is a technology that is not viable today, but it will be in the future, but maybe it might be too late. The other thing is they use any current crisis to delay. So it could be COVID, now is not the time. It could be inflation, now is not the time. And it could be war, definitely not the time to do anything about this climate issue. And we had recently this, a major international oil company CEO say to Europeans in the middle of very high natural gas prices, that now definitely is not the time to put solar panels or to insulate your houses to reduce your energy, which of course doesn't make much sense in most people's opinion. The other thing is this idea of deflection of blame. So the fossil fuel industry, where it tries to blame you, to blame the consumers for your lifestyle. It's all your fault. It's not the systems that we have in place, the energy systems, the transportation system. It's your mistakes. You're living an extravagant lifestyle, and you need to work on your carbon footprint. And this idea of carbon footprint is actually an invention by an oil company, BP. They came up with this idea, and they shifted the blame. And think about it. If you don't have public transportation, or if you don't have electric vehicles, and the oil industry and the auto industry have stopped public transportation or lobbied against public transportation, lobbied against electric vehicles for decades. And if you don't have those things, can you blame people for driving cars that use petrol? Not really. So it's a system change, not individual action that are the real issue here. The third issue is division, and creating divisions in terms of the society needs to do this, but hey, the society also needs to think about other social needs, other economic needs, and other environmental needs. So why don't you focus on all these other things instead, you climate people? So, for example, they would say, what about jobs? Those people who work in the coal industry are going to lose their jobs now if we transition away from coal, as if there are no jobs in any sector but coal, as if renewable energy does not produce jobs. And also, what about energy independence and sovereignty, as if climate change does not destabilize regimes and cause serious economic harm to states as well. And the final approach that we see is an approach called doomism, which is basically, it's too late. This is inevitable. There's nothing really we could do, and no matter what effort we put in, we're already going to fry. So, and that I think is a very depressing, but also completely untrue. Yes, there's incredible urgency, and the window of opportunity is getting smaller every day, but there's still hope, and there's still something we could do to avoid the worst of climate change. So, what can we do? We vaccinate ourselves by basically climate literacy. Read the facts, read the science, sort of tell your community about the basics of it. And then that helps you understand how the manipulation happens, who benefits from any attempt to stall action or to prevent a transition towards a more cleaner, more sustainable world. And the other thing is to support those who do that, those who call out for change towards a more sustainable environment, scientists, but also the advocates. And finally, those who give you half-truths, they need to be accountable. So ask them to be accountable for the half-truths that they have been spewing. And with that, I will thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I've been told by the organisers we have to close now. But just to wrap up a few key points that I took away, I think some fascinating presentations. Thank you all for your time and insights. We really appreciate it. But I mean, regardless of whatever system of governance we live under, it's pretty clear that we need to strengthen our institutions. We need to keep strengthening the international rules-based order in order to promote a sustainable, inclusive, and just future for all. And regardless of the size of our country, we're all facing very similar challenges, but it's only by working together and identifying shared opportunities to tackle those challenges that I think we're going to be able to overcome some of the threats that have been outlined by our panelists. And Kareem's point there, I thought was really important. He's talking about climate threats, but whatever the threat we face, I think we have to act today. And it's fantastic that we've had this Stratcom conference, because I've certainly come away with new ideas to take away and put into work in my own work out in the Middle East. So thank you once more to the Directorate of Communications. Thank you to the Republic of Turkey, to the Stratcom organisers, and thank you to you, the audience, for being so gracious and for your question.